Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have a special guest on, Kyle Golding. And the reason why this one caught my attention is because there was some content that he posted on LinkedIn with the Saturday morning hustle. And I was like, that is awesome. So welcome to the show, Kyle.
Thank you very much, Terrell. I'm happy to be here.
Now, as everyone who's watching can see, that Kyle is in his podcast studio. So yes, he is an avid podcaster. And I think even when I was listening to, I think it was episode 97, where he was talking about selling. And I think there was some very great insight where he talked about, moving from that process of just trying to separate people from their money and really adding some value to them. So Kyle, definitely, thank you for all the great insight that you share.
Thank you.
And we'll definitely dive into that. But before we do, I want to talk about, what was your background before you started your business?
So I've been working in the Golden Group has been around since 2011, which is my current establishment with my three partners. Been in marketing full time since 2000, but from 85 to 2000, I was in the music business. So I tell people I was an entrepreneur before I knew what the word entrepreneur was, as I got kicked out of my first band because I wasn't very good. And they said, well, but do you know how to run sound? I'm like, yeah, I do, even though I didn't really know how to do it. And so I took all the equipment home and fiddled with it until I could figure out how to use it, and was running sound for bands, and typically garage bands, high school bands, that kind of stuff. But they were making, $50 a night, and they had to pay me $50 a night. So I was the only person getting paid to come out and set up the show and run sound, and they couldn't do the show without me. So that was my first business, which turned into like a career in doing front house production for concerts and tours. Eventually had a recording studio, eventually started managing tours and working on big, huge festivals like Edge Fest out of Dallas, which eventually got me onto Lollapalooza and some of the other big music items like that. Did a lot of studio production work. And when I transitioned out of the music business, my degrees were in advertising and PR. And I had done so much promotion of concerts and artists that that's how I kind of got into marketing. And also had a graphic design background, a very technical background. I was one of the few people that could use a computer in those days when Macs were really early. So got into graphic design as a transition into marketing, and in marketing eventually into business development. And that's how I ended up where I'm at today.
Gotcha. Now that is quite the interesting. I haven't had anyone on the show that's had a journey quite like that.
I had that massive career change, in the middle of my life span there.
Gotcha. And then I think also with starting in marketing back in 2000, you have probably seen a ton of just changes since then. I mean, with all the changes, whether it be economically, with the Great Recession, to now, the pandemic that we're in, just with the change in the technology. I mean, because 2000, yeah, Facebook wasn't even around. Well, I guess
social media wasn't a thing yet. Like I remember the first discussion about a website for a band in 1995. And this was back when, websites were basically text with occasional picture and a spinning GIF of some sort. Really elementary, rudimentary type stuff. So the first ideas of social media with MySpace and things like that, obviously the music industry paid a lot of attention to that. But yeah, before Facebook, before Twitter, before smartphones, I remember when I got my first BlackBerry, and it was a big deal that, it had these extra features besides just being a phone. I still have some of those pictures I took of that with the BlackBerry. The camera quality was terrible. But, it was a camera and a phone. No one had ever had that before. The internet became more important. Social media happened, smart technology, smartphones and tablets, the computer power that we have now. When I was in the music industry, I was using like a Mac Quadra to run Pro Tools off 3.5-inch floppy disks, that we had to carry the desktop unit around from place to place because there was no such thing as a laptop, and definitely not one that could power Pro Tools. And it took everything that machine had to run 8 channels of Pro Tools which at the time was super rudimentary. The screen was just black and white, no color to it. But it was so much more advanced than working in analog. So definitely have been through the ride of technology becoming more and more important. And then almost, I think, becoming such a weaved into our fabric of our lifestyle that now with the COVID situation, with people being isolated, it's helpful and then sometimes it's detrimental at the same time, because we're so tied to technology today. So it's pros and cons, but overall, I think we're doing a great job of using technology to continue to connect people as well as we can.
And one of the things that I noticed from, talking to people who have, such a healthy and rich history in their expertise is that a lot of times the advice that they give, when you hear it, you're like, you know what, that seems so simple. Like, even like I was talking about what you shared on, I think it's episode 97. So if you're watching or you're listening, go check out his podcast, episode 97. I really like it. But the things you talked about there, it's like, it wasn't like earth shattering. It's just like, that makes sense. And so do you feel like as technology has like advanced that people kind of lose sight of the fundamentals that actually work?
I don't think it's a technology issue. I think it's a internal focus issue. The joke in sales was always used car sales, right? Like the used car salesman was always the guy who tried to, just sell you any jalopy on the lot to get money out of you. And that's that type of selling people dislike. And yeah, common sense is if you don't want that guy to rip you off selling you a lemon, when you're out trying to sell something, why would you try to sell someone a lemon or sell them something they don't need or they don't appreciate? And that is pretty much common sense. But when you get down into, you got to hit your numbers today or you're fired, people kind of lose their sense of direction on how to do things. So I think it's more of a big picture, small picture, idea. If you think big picture and you're always thinking about developing your audience and developing loyalty in customers and repeat business and predictable business, and you're not focused on today's numbers or this week's numbers, then you have the ability to sell things to people in the way they want to be sold, as opposed to having buyer's remorse or having a bad reputation or, and especially today, that's the other aspect on the technology side is, back in the day, if the used car salesman got over on you and he sold you a lemon for twice what it was worth, well, you might have told your neighbor, maybe some family members, and like 10 people are like, we're not going to buy a car from those people. But now, you can use Facebook, and you can use Google, you can use Yelp, you can use all the review sites, you can put it out on your own social media. You can tell people if you had a bad business experience, a lot of people really easily. Yes. And so that's the other aspect is if you're going to build a really sustainable business, people talk all the time about how to get reviews, how to get referrals, all these things online. Number one is don't rip anyone off. As simple as that sounds, right? Like take care of people and build business relationships. And ultimately the economics work out if you go big picture and you develop relationships with people. Back in the day, with people that like, I don't know where else to go to buy a car or buy a TV or even my doctor. Like I've got one doctor. What am I supposed to do? Now we have so much control of information and so many options that it's up to you as the consumer to do your research and be prepared to go in. And so it's not about, do I want to buy the TV today or not? It's which exact one and what places am I going to go to where they're going to take care of me as a human being.
Gotcha. And I think that is a great philosophy. And I'm quite sure that in the Golden Group that you guys have worked that in. So tell us a little bit about what that's been like with, developing and growing the Golden Group.
Well, so when we started 2011, we started with one client and it was a friend. And so it made it easier to kind of get that ball rolling. But we spent the first couple of years kind of taking any project that came in the door. And we very much are kind of a traditional kind of ad agency with a little bit of marketing business development on the backside, because that's just what I've been doing on the corporate side before I went out on my own. But my other business partners weren't advertisers. They were business people. They'd been people that kind of upper management in corporate settings and had done a lot more structure and kind of business side of things instead of the marketing side of things. And so our combination allowed us to branch off into different ways. I never wanted to be an ad agency because there's a billion of them in the world and they're all really well established. I wasn't going to go in there and knock those guys around with, 2 business partners, It was, but so we took everything that came to us for those first couple of years, but then as soon as we got stable as a business, we actively really tried to scale down that roster and be much more specific in the type of clients that we brought in. We went from just doing projects to doing full service, long-term relationships. That was that relationship piece I was talking about earlier, and really focused on what the next 5 years of the business would look like, not paying bills today. So we had to hustle and grind to make the bills. But once we got to the point where we could pay our bills, we really tried to specialize, tried to dive down really deep in our niche, and try to do something that was different than what a lot of offerings were in our market and in our area, so that we could be different, create differentiation, have potential to do things that other businesses just wouldn't do. Because like I said, I'm not gonna outproduce an ad agency with 30 employees on the creative team, But if I take a completely different approach to marketing, audience development, and ultimately how to drive sales and economics for a business, 1 or 2 out of 20 business owners that want to do business that way, I've got a real great chance of getting them. Where people who want that traditional, figure out who our audience is, create creative, buy the media, measure it, repeat. Hey, go on and call your local ad agency. That's not what we do.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that I always find interesting, partially because my background is accounting and finance, so it's like marketing is not a world I grew up, or I guess you say professionally grew up learning. I have a tremendous respect for it as I'm learning it now as an entrepreneur myself. But one of the things that I hear a lot of people talk about is that, getting to that point where they realize they had to, like you said, niche down and find, where's their sweet spot, where they really add value. And I hear a lot of, I guess, entrepreneurs who haven't made it to that point talk about the anxiety that they have with doing that. Like, well, if I niche down, there's things I might miss. Like, how did you navigate overcoming that anxiety?
That, as we have the luxury of saying no to clients that weren't right for us, that was one of the first questions we asked them, was if they understand who their audience was and how they were going about it. And those business owners are like, hey, I want to get every dollar out there, and I don't, if I specialize, then I miss, because they're always talking about, I miss this and I miss that. They're just afraid that they're leaving $1 on the table, even though they're spending $4 to go make that dollar, So we had a lot of those conversations about, here's what we're going to ask you to do. And a lot of it is specialization and differentiation. It's like, set yourself apart and then go specifically at your best audience and no one else. And when a decision maker looks at it and they go, oh, no, we don't want to offend anybody. We don't want to push away business. Then we have the luxury right now going, that we're not for you. Like, you should go somewhere else, because we believe in that philosophy that strongly. And I'm not going to tell someone what they want to hear and then end up with something that doesn't work. And that's one of the reasons I left corporate marketing. Was someone in the chain above me said, typically the sales team, right? We need to tell people this, or we need to do this. And they just, whatever hit their fancy that week. And they would say, tell the marketing team to do this. And our response is like, well, how do you know? Like, what research did we do? Did we survey? Did we talk to, who do we talk to figure out if that's the thing? Or that's completely opposite of what we've been doing. Why would we do that? And they would say, well, just do it.
Wow.
And then, create an ad campaign or create a brochure or add something to the website, whatever it was. And then 6 months later, they're all mad about how much money you spent because it didn't work, because there was no strategy. And it was just throwing ideas out. And I got tired of being blamed for the numbers not going up or even going down when I was supposed to be doing my job. And I'm like, all I'm doing is making you happy as my boss.
Wow.
So I hated that. I hated that situation, because I knew a lot of these ideas that these supposed bosses had were never going to work. And I got to a point where I would just tell them, I'm like, that's a terrible idea. It's going to fail. And then when it would fail, I told you so, because I was like, fire me. I don't care, because I don't like working here anyways. And they still would be like, well, you should have done this better. Our numbers didn't go up. Why did you fail at your job? And I'm like, you set me up for failure. So now that I get to work with clients that I get to pick and choose, I'm like, I'm not working for someone who just wants to crunch numbers and what did you do for me today? It's got to be done in the right way that has a chance of succeeding. Not everything can be successful, but even stuff that's not successful, you have to be able to learn from it and take that information back in and adapt and adjust for the next time you do it. And anyone who wants to skip right to, create the widget, sell it, make a ton of money, they're missing out, and they're not going to be successful anyways.
Gotcha. So as you think about, that unique strategy, what are the services that people can hire your firm for?
First of all, strategic planning. Everything starts with strategy. And for us, strategy is audience development, positioning, differentiation. It really is understanding what your business is at its core, what your core values are, what your actual strengths and weaknesses are. And this is where people, they got to be honest. It's an internal process. You have to understand everyone has weaknesses. Every business does, every human being does. It just is what it is. So if you can't acknowledge the things that your competitors do better than you, then you won't position yourself away from those weaknesses. Everyone wants to talk about their strengths and what they do well, but you have to make sure that you avoid those situations where it's your weaknesses versus your competitor's strengths. So positioning is huge for us. Find the right position, find the right audience, let that audience tell you how do you want to do business. That's it too. A lot of people, especially startups, they have a business model and it works for them 100%. We do this and we make all this money, and then the client gets whatever they get.
Wow.
We're like, no. You have to find out what people in 2020 expect from a product or service, how it's delivered, what they pay for it, what the bells and whistles are, whatever it is, even your corporate responsibility or things of that nature. Then you have to build a system that you can work back to get to profitability from that, because trying to force stuff down people's throat, it goes back to the idea of used car sales. Mm-hmm. So we work really hard on business models that are based on audience and market demands that then can match up with the strengths of the individuals in the business, so that you end up with a marriage of strong business model, perfectly attuned to the right audience, giving a product or service in the way the audience expects it, they see value in it. Then you can build really predictable, repeatable, profitable business.
Awesome. Now, so where can people find you online or on social media?
So, of course, we're the website, thegoldengroup.com. We're on Instagram as The Golden Group. We're on Twitter as Golden Group. If you find a high-end travel agent, that's the other Golden Group in the world. They do luxury travel. We don't do luxury travel. So if you find them, you found the wrong Golden Group. We're also YouTube. We're on all the social media channels. An easy Google search for Golden Group Oklahoma City will definitely get you to our website or any of our social media. The podcast, the Neo Marketing Podcast, is on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, on iHeartRadio, and YouTube as well.
Awesome. And I want to talk about the podcast because, I guess those viewing and those listening, they've heard me talk about episode 97. If you guys haven't picked up a trend, I like episode 97. But tell us a little bit about, what is the podcast about?
So the podcast is a bi-weekly podcast. It's myself and one of my business partners, Pritch Pritchard, who runs the PR department at OU at the University of Oklahoma. Boomer Sooner for everyone outside of Oklahoma. But he's one of our business partners here. And so we do kind of a pro and con back and forth on different business topics, about typically 15 or 20 minutes per episode. Episode 97 was actually an hour episode that we did on business development A to Z. We had 10 different aspects of business development on that particular podcast. But we talk about all kinds of things like strategy, public relations, audience development. Sometimes we take on things that are current events, something that happened in the news or something that happened in the business world. Obviously, we're talking a lot about COVID right now. In the last couple of months, there's been a lot of response to COVID, how people can adjust their business models, how they can pivot. Adapt, adopt, or pivot has been the term we've been using with all of our clients, potential clients around here, is how to adjust yourself to what's happening in the world because of COVID-19. So that's been a big one for the last few months. We're coming up, episode 97 is the most current one. We're coming up on our 100th episode pretty soon, so we're looking forward to that. We're going to add some new features and things like that. But essentially, two kind of business experts speaking from two different perspectives. I'm a marketing and kind of creative background. Pritch is traditionally, he was 25 years in the military before he got into teaching at the college level. And he was a public information officer in the Navy, and then he teaches PR at the collegiate level. So Pritch is much more of a traditional approach, more of a do your research and go look at things very strategically. I'm a lot more of a creative problem solving, adapt to what's happening right this second, market like it's 2020, not like it's 2015 or 2010. And so we go back and forth on different subjects, different topics that relate to running a business, marketing a business, creating audience, and ultimately creating a successful model for the people that work in the business, whether they're the owners, the employees, or the customers, clients that they interact with.
Awesome. Now, before we wrap up, there is one question I like to ask every guest that comes on to the show. And when you think about, your journey through your career professionally and then in your entrepreneurial journey, what are two lessons that you have encountered that you were like, you know what, these lessons, every entrepreneur should know or grasp these at some point if they want to be successful?
I'll say the first one is you have to be 1,000,000% dedicated to your ethics. Your ethics enter a room before you do. And absolutely, and not just what you put out in the world, but literally how you make decisions, how you treat people. Anytime you cut a corner ethically or you do something that's questionable, that one instance of making that mistake can cut 10 years of quality business service away. In the short term, sometimes it's really hard to say no to something or to turn away money or to tell a client no or to not get in a situation that's very beneficial on economically or profitability, but you have to kind of compromise your ethics. But when you do, once you get into it, you find out you're really not making as much money as you thought. And then how you build your ethics back up will cost you 100 times more than what you did for the thing that you compromised on. So it's easy now, this many years into my career, to be like, you have to absolutely say no to things that don't feel right, are unethical, or when people are trying to take you down paths that you shouldn't go down as a professional and as a person. And so it's easy to say, well, I don't rip anyone off, or I don't do anything that's shady. But sometimes business deals you look at and go, yeah, there's something about this that's not really on the up and up. You have to say no and walk away and be very clear about that, because you can't regain those ethical lapses. So that's one. I don't want to say I learned it the hard way. I didn't necessarily have a big ethical dilemma anytime, but mentors of mine who instilled this in me have always been on the right side of things, and I've always seen their career continue to go. And then when they're at the apex of their career, everyone was like, you want to do business with that person. They're absolutely someone you would do business with. So mentors have led by example on the idea of holding your ethics at the highest standards. And the times that I've taken oh, this hurts, but I got to say no or pass on this, in hindsight, you watch it later on and go, man, I'm glad I wasn't involved in that. So definitely follow your gut and keep your ethics front and foremost would be advice number one. I think the second piece of advice that we give you is no one's career, even when people are at the apex of success and you look at their career, whoever they are, Mark Cuban or Elon Musk or anyone like that, Damon John, you look at them and go, man, that's what I'm trying to build. That path from where you are to where that is not a straight line. And what you think will get you there, it's going to change and it's going to morph. And some things that seem like they're setbacks aren't really. And you may end up being highly successful, but it doesn't necessarily look like what was in your head when you started. And you have to be okay with that. Like and it's because it happens to everyone. You just have to be okay with, if you're moving in the right direction and you're going the way you want to go, but it's not specifically how you mapped it out, you just got to go with the flow. Because if you're too rigid in your process, you'll miss opportunities. And sometimes you end up in great situations with huge opportunities you would have never pursued because they weren't in that roadmap of yours. So you have to be open to that process and understand it's not a straight line.
Awesome. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for coming to the show, to talking about your story, your business, and sharing the wisdom and the tips with us. We really appreciate it. So definitely thank you for coming onto the show.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. I had a great time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, be sure to click the subscribe button and follow us on all social media platforms as the Business Talk Library.